We had the pleasure of a 2 days passiere at and around Lyon Station, and while in the section now becoming so full of interest, improved the opportunity to jot down a few items for the benefit of our readers.
Let me read you the headline from an article in the Los Angeles Daily Herald newspaper dated March 28, 1875.
Up in the mountains, 2 days in and around Lyon Station. The railroad tunnel, a Herculean project. The oil region, a greasy subject, but it may prove a rich one. Reliable information about the Much-Mystified section. The Much-Mystified section they are talking about is south and west of what today we call the city of Santa Clarita. Hello, my name is Philip Scorza, and I'd like to welcome you to our show, Points of Interest. The Herald was a newspaper published daily in Los Angeles starting in 1873. On March 28, 1875, a reporter for the paper wrote a long story about a 2-day visit he paid to our area. The town of Newhall hadn't been started yet. Very few people lived here. Apparently, the area was little known to the readers of Los Angeles and not easy to travel to or through. Only 10 years earlier, in 1864, the first road leading north out of the San Fernando Valley was completed. That road is called Beale's Cut, and it's where our reporter started his visit, and we're going to follow along. In making the trip from San Fernando, the present terminus of the railroad, to the station some 9 miles further north, we occupied a snug berth on the top of the telegraph line stage, and never have we enjoyed a ride better. The night air was cool and exhilarating and well to be appreciated under good heavy wrappings. The moon and stars, out in full brilliancy, rendered every object along the line almost as distinctly visible as by daylight. No wonder that we fell into a poetical humor and saw scenery where otherwise it would have been simply mountains and moonshine. Up the rugged and serpentine road to the summit, through the deep cut at the top of the mountain, and down the other side to the valley, and we were at Lyon's Station. Survey maps from 1875 show us that Lyon's Station was on both sides of the road leading from Beale's Cut. The place was started in the early 1850s by a fellow named Josiah Hart. After several buyers and sellers, the outpost was purchased by Sanford Lyon and renamed Lyon Station. The entrance to Eternal Valley Cemetery is where Lyon Station once stood. About this time, a fellow named John Butterfield started the Butterfield overland stage route to take travelers from Missouri to California. Lyon Station became a regular stop on the Butterfield route, heading into or out of Los Angeles. Our reporter goes on to describe Lyon Station. Though unpretentious itself, it is an inviting place for the weary denizen of the city, where he can play the recluse if he wish, breathe the invigorating mountain air, and banish all thought of care and responsibility. The station proper is a well-constructed frame building, about 30 by 60 feet in dimensions, and answering at once the purposes of a store, post office, telegraph office, depot, and tavern. Besides this, there is a large stable and, back towards the foothills on the west, a little cottage half hid by a growth of mountain oak. This picture of the Lyon brothers and their wives, standing in front of the little cottage, is the only picture we have of Lyon Station. Alan Pollack is the president of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society. He is one of the people who got the St. Francis Dam Disaster National Memorial Site, and he's written a number of books and articles about our local history. I have asked Alan to come and join us today so he can tell us about the history of Lyon Station.
Hello, Phil.
How are you, Alan?
Doing fine.
Good.
Thank you.
I was wondering.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I was wondering if you could tell us about the history of Lyon Station. I understand there's been a lot of people that have owned this place.
Yes. Well, running through our valley in an east-west pathway dividing Valencia and Newhall is one of our major thoroughfares called Lyons Avenue.
Right.
Well, turns out that Lyons Avenue could be named a lot of things based on the history of the area. Ironically, the man that Lyons Avenue is named after, Sanford Lyon, only owned that station for 1 year.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had other owners that were there for much longer, and we could have named it Malazewski Avenue or Krasinski Avenue or Hart Avenue.
Okay. Krasinski is the guy that was at Lyon Station when our reporter came up here to visit the place.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And actually, if you go back in the history of what we call Lyon Station, there were several owners.
Okay.
It's starting with Josiah Hart, who was the first person that we know of that inhabited that site. He came to Los Angeles in 1852, and we know that he was at what became Lyon Station in 1854, and at that time it was called Hart's Ranch.
Hart's Ranch. Okay. So every guy that took over this place named it for himself. I could have called it Scorza's Ranch.
Yeah.
Scorza's.
And about this time, this is when Sanford Lyon comes in. He purchased Hosmer Station from the Philadelphia and California Petroleum Company in 1868.
Wow. His
main business, and during his ownership of Lyon Station, was actually running a sheep ranch next to it.
Okay.
And during that next year, there was a drought, and his sheep ranch business sputtered.
Okay.
And he then sold out the station and all its belongings to Adam Malazewski between 1869 and 1871.
So wait a minute, this is Lyons who only owned it for a year?
He owned it for 1 year, and yet he gets Lyons Avenue named after him.
Good for him.
And in perpetuity, the station has always been known as Lyon Station, in spite of the fact that Lyon only owned it for 1 year.
So it doesn't matter who owned it or had the lease on the property or anything, they called it Lyon Station.
Correct.
That's amazing.
As a matter of fact, one of the subsequent lessees or owners of the station actually had to correct the media who was calling it and naming it after him, and he put out an announcement, no, it's still Lyon Station.
Do you have a list of how many names you actually have owned this place?
There are 10 people that have leased or owned the station.
10 people. And it got named after one guy who was here for a year.
Actually, I'm wrong.
What?
There were 11 because the very last owner technically of Lyon Station was Henry Mayo Newhall.
Ah, okay. So Henry Mayo ended up with the property for himself then.
He took it over in 1879, and he pretty much presided over the demise of the station, which is really what he wanted. Anyway.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, so when our reporter came up here in 1875, and he comes to Lyon Station and he meets this guy named Krasinski,
correct,
who had the lease on the place. Okay, now who did he have the lease from?
He was leasing from Adam Malazewski.
Krasinski was leasing from Malazewski?
Yes.
So when I go to the Vons on the corner of Lyons and Wiley Canyon, I could be going to the Vons on the corner of Krasinski and Malazewski.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There's no reason that, although, look.
Well, it's easier to spell.
Sanford Lyon was definitely a significant pioneer of the Santa Clarita Valley.
Yes.
And perhaps you named Lyons Avenue because of that. But Lyons Avenue, just take note that Lyons Avenue is not the correct name of Sanford Lyon.
Right.
It didn't have an S at the end of the name.
That's right.
So presumably then it's either a misnomer or it was named after Lyon Station.
Right.
And
but it is easier to spell Lyon than it is Malazewski.
And the thing is, though, so while I would definitely credit Sanford Lyon with being a significant inhabitant or pioneer of the Santa Clarita Valley, Lyon Station, I don't know if the avenue necessarily.
But if I remember correctly, Lyon Station became Eternal Valley Cemetery, and we have a pioneer section in the cemetery. And one of the people buried in our pioneer section is a lion.
Yes.
Sanford or?
That's Sanford Lyon.
That's the brother.
Yeah. Cyrus Lyon, first of all, did not purchase
He didn't purchase the
Lyon
station.
station with Sanford.
Okay, okay.
He was in Los Angeles.
All right, all right.
He was famous in Los Angeles for being one of the Los Angeles Rangers who tamed the wild streets of Los Angeles in the 1850s.
Okay.
And I believe he's buried in Evergreen Cemetery.
But the lion who owned Lyon Station is buried at Eternal Valley Cemetery.
Yes, and I believe his son is buried there too.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
We'll have to take a walk over there and check it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling us about this. This is amazing. I love this stuff.
It's really an interest, and our local historians didn't quite get this story right. And
well, I could see why they would get it wrong. There's so many people that own this property.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it.
So part of what we're trying to do now is debunk some of the misinformation that came down to us.
And you're the guy that's going to do it for us. Thank you, Alan.
I'm hoping. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I have to follow our reporter. He's going to take me to our next site now. So
Please do.
I'll leave you here.
All right.
Thank you, Guy.
All right.
All right. Our reporter for the Los Angeles Daily Herald newspaper goes on to write, "The line as surveyed runs almost due north from San Fernando. The work of tunneling the mountain is a stupendous undertaking, which can scarcely be appreciated until one sees the immense walls of rock and contemplates the solid base, which must be worked through by blast and pick. It is the intention of the engineers to prosecute the work simultaneously on both sides of the mountain. Incline shafts will be sunk from above to the projected level of the tunnel. In each of these shafts, 2 forces will be employed, pushing their way in opposite directions. Long and stubborn toil will be required to accomplish this. And if at the end of 18 months a ray of light flashes through the mountain, the most sanguine expectations will meet a realization." We passed 2 camps of railroad graders, whose white tents gave a picturesque setting to the little canyons and benches where they nestled. Other parties are scattered about at convenient points, and all making preparations for the grand work ahead. The grand work our reporter is talking about was the digging of the railroad tunnel under our mountain. Here to tell us more about this is a fellow member of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, Mr. Mike Jarrell. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Phil.
How are you, sir?
Doing great on this beautiful spring afternoon.
It is, isn't it? Our reporter, who was writing for the LA Herald newspaper, said that this was in March of 1875. He said that there wasn't much railroad work going on around here. What was happening in our area for railroads?
Well, that might have been true because of economic situations going on at the time, but there had been quite a bit of railroad construction actually in the Los Angeles area.
Oh.
But it was very isolated. In 1872, the very first railroad in Southern California, the Los Angeles and San Pedro Railroad, was built from the harbor at Wilmington up to Los Angeles. But like I said, it was an isolated railroad, but it connected the new harbor to Los Angeles.
Okay.
But
but there was nothing connecting Los Angeles to, let's say, Northern California.
to the outside world at all.
To the outside world at all.
No.
Okay, so this was the
Other than by ship, by ocean, or by stage or wagon, could passengers travel or commerce flow in and out of Los Angeles at that
because
time.
our reporter he ended up in San Fernando, and then he came over the hills on Beale's Cut on a stagecoach. And then how did they possibly build this tunnel without the use of machines and gasoline and power diggers or any of that stuff? Okay, and how did they go about digging this incredible thing?
Well, they had some really talented surveyors, I'll tell you that, because they actually started building north while work was still underway over the Tehachapi's in the Mojave. And in 1873, the railroad had been extended from Los Angeles up to San Fernando.
Right.
And then in the spring of 1875, work began on the tunnel itself. And they they sent forces down here to start work at the northern end of the tunnel, and then forces started at the southern end. And then they also built 2 shafts down from the top of the mountain down to where the tunnel actually needed to be built.
The level of the
tunnel. And again,
tunnel.
just the surveying that went into this is incredible.
Okay.
Because they were building from 2 directions, plus 2 shafts that they were also building both directions out of. So you had 6 crews.
Okay.
Working simultaneous towards each other.
Okay.
And they only missed by inches.
Wow. So let me just see if I got this straight. So they dug shafts down, and then when they got to the bottom of the shaft, they turned in opposite directions, and they
They knew exactly how deep to build the shaft and where to start.
That's amazing.
And you could just imagine if you just turn just slight.
Right.
And start heading in the wrong direction.
Because I'm thinking to myself, if I had done something like this, you would be going in 4 different directions at 3 different levels, and I never would have gotten that straightened out. That's
it looked
just
like
amazing.
an ant colony under the mountain, right?
Yes, and they worked on this for how long?
It took a little over a year. They started in the spring of 1875, and in July of 1876, the crews met. They all met. And then it took another month to clean out the tunnel and get it all timber lined and lay track, and it didn't. They had already built the railroad south from Mojave through Soledad Canyon.
Okay.
Or we're in the process of it, and the rail crews met at Lang.
Okay.
And that was in September of 1876, if I have the month right.
Okay.
It was like July. July they finished it. August they had it ready for track lane, and September the rails met at Lang.
They had a one of those railroad where they drove the golden spike things at a place called Lang Station.
Yep, which is still a location on the railroad.
Oh, all right.
Yep.
And according to our local historian, a fellow named Remy Nadeau, when they did this. When they had this big signing thing, there were like 4,000 Chinese, because the Chinese were the ones who did all the work.
The Chinese did all the work. That seems like a lot.
That's a lot of people, isn't it?
That probably included the workers that were employed on the line working south, because the tunnel project employed 1,000 Chinese workers and a little over 300 of other workers. Okay. So obviously the Chinese were quite prominent in the building of the tunnel.
Because according to Remy Naidoo, he said something about the Chinese were standing there leaning on their shovels, quote, like an army that had just fought their battle and now they were at rest or something like that. So it was, and then of course the train started running and went right through Mr. Newhall's property, and the town of Newhall started and all that stuff.
Well, don't forget, Mr. Newhall was on board of directors of the Southern Pacific.
That helps.
So that may have played a little bit into that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming here and showing it to us and telling us all about this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right.
Carrying on, our reporter writes, much has been said and written about the San Fernando oil region. The thorough investigation of this matter was one of the main objects of our visit to the district. There can be no doubt that the oil exists. The most extensive development is about 7 miles northwest of Lyon Station at the head of a deep canyon. Entering a gorge in the mountains some 2 miles below the well, we wended our way up a newly constructed wagon road and wound about in a continuous zigzag conforming with the natural defile. The canyon grew narrower as we ascended. Here, on either side, were almost perpendicular walls of rock rising to the height of 80 or 90 feet. Through this, a small stream of water found its course. Upon the surface of this, we could readily see the shimmer of oil. Upon emerging from this narrow defile, we saw a little to our right the object of our search, the boring apparatus of the Temple Well. Our reporter, oh, by the way, we don't know our reporter's name. Apparently, they did not give bylines, reporters' names back then. Anyway, our reporter arrived here on a Sunday, and the only person that was here was the cook. And the cook knew absolutely nothing about digging oil wells. However, our reporter did find out that they had dug down about 200 feet. They have already gotten 35 barrels of oil, and then the whole well caved in, and they had to dig another well. I asked my friend Evan Decker to join us on the hike. Evan used to be on the board of directors of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, and currently he's a volunteer at one of the most historic sites in our area, and we're going to talk about that site in just a few minutes. Evan, come on in here, would you please?
Hiya, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Evan. So our reporter was here in 1875, and he tells us that there were a lot of people up here that were looking for and digging for oil.
Right.
Obviously, they wanted to become rich.
Correct.
And eventually, some people did find oil and become wealthy, and it brought a lot of wealth and enterprise to this whole area. And there was one particular oil well, is Pico Oil Spring, something like that. And it's about 4 miles west of us. It's one of the biggest places that there is, and that place is called
Mentryville.
Mentryville, right. Tell us about Mentryville.
Well, thank you, Phil. So Mentryville was considered really the state's first commercially successful oil field, really not only in the state, but the West. You know, the oil field there was so successful that a whole boomtown sprouted up. Really, by 1885, you had 200 families living there. Everybody living in boarding houses, bunk houses. Families lived in little dwellings there. There was a dance hall, a schoolhouse, a bakery, just all different things that you could possibly, imagine, for a self-sustaining town. So really, oil had been flowing there up until about the 1930s when it started slowing down to a trickle. But they were still pumping oil out of there. Well number 4, which is the historic CSO or Pico number 4, which really started it all, operated until February of 1990. And it was considered the longest commercially successful oil well producing in the West. And it is a state and national historic landmark. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now what do you do at Mentryville?
So I volunteer. I sometimes give tours on occasion to individuals that are interested. I kind of look after the place, make sure things are clean, keep an eye on the place. It is kind of out there, in the middle of nowhere. So, there's not much up there.
There's 2 buildings there.
Correct.
Right? And they are?
So we have up there the original 1885 Felton Schoolhouse that still survives.
Okay.
It's a 1-room schoolhouse, and the children were taught there 1st through 8th grade.
Okay.
And the school colors were, I think it was blue and gold, and their school flowers were lupins and daisies.
The Mentryville School.
Yes.
And the other building?
We call it the Pico Cottage. So it's a 13-room house that was built in about 1896 by the first superintendent, Charles Alexander Mentry.
Okay.
And
hence the name Mentryville.
Correct, yes.
Well, listen, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you coming up here and joining us and taking this wonderful hike into this gorgeous place. And thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Phil.
In general, we conclude that there is an oil-bearing stratum at least 15 miles in length, running northwest and southeast and underlying all of the springs and oil claims which we have described. Lyon Station was bypassed by the railroad and no longer exists. But the railroad tunnel, which was being built when our reporter traveled through here in 1875, is still serving our city of Santa Clarita every day. In 1876, when the railroad tunnel was completed, the rails were joined together up in Soledad Canyon at a place called Lang's Station. Also in 1876, Alex Mentry of Mentryville completed Pico number 4 oil well, and the whole California oil industry was born. Hence the name Standard Oil of California. Oil needed a refinery, and in 1877,
Construction started at the mouth of where westbound trains emerged from our new tunnel. For about a dozen years, what became known as the Pioneer Oil Refinery here off Pine Street and across from Hart Park worked to light up the West. The Pioneer Oil Refinery of Newhall is believed to be the oldest refinery in the world and is now considered State Historical Landmark number 173. History has proven our reporter correct. The last line of his article states, "But this event lies as yet in the undeveloped future, and we can patiently await the results of the investigation." Wouldn't it be interesting if we could see what our reporter thought of Santa Clarita today? I'd like to thank Alan Pollack, Mike Jarrell, and Evan Decker for joining us and going along following this unnamed reporter's journey through this much mystified section. My name is Philip Scorza, and I'd like to thank you for watching Points of Interest.